Hi, my name's Ellie. I'm here as the classifier for Archery GB. Um, I'm currently the only classifier in the UK for para archery, but hopefully that will be changing soon as we're running some training next year. So hopefully we'll be starting to see some new classifiers on the circuit. I have been an archery classifier for 6 or 7 years, I think. So yeah, it's been a while. I've met lots of people, and yeah, seen lots of different conditions. So in archery, there are three types of classifications. There's the standing class, which is for the least impaired archers who will have a minimum of 25 deficit points in either their lower limb or their upper limbs. Then there is the W2 classification, which is the first of our wheelchair classifications, where archers will have a minimum of 50 deficit points in their lower limbs. And then we have the W1 classification, which is for our most impaired archers who have a minimum of 50 points in their lower limbs and 25 in their upper limbs, as well as 5 in their trunk. So a deficit point is where we have a measurement system for muscles, and a healthy muscle will score 5 points. A muscle that is working at below optimum function or not working at all will score less than 5 points. So if on assessment a muscle is scored at 3 points, then that is 2 points less than 5 and therefore counts as 2 deficit points. So we determine eligible and non-eligible conditions based on the International Paralympic Committee's definitions of disability. Unfortunately, a lot of that definition does come down to what's measurable and what's not measurable. So conditions which can be measured will be things that result in neurological weakness, ataxia, amputations, obviously. Those types of conditions which are quite static, don't tend to change on a day-to-day basis, and can be formally assessed. Conditions that are sort of fluctuating or invisible generally do not meet the classification criteria. So things like hypermobility syndromes, anything that is pain-related or sort of pain-based, anything that is fatigue-based, most medical conditions, so like heart conditions, lung conditions, won't be classifiable because there's debate over how much they impact on archery anyway, but also they just can't be measured to determine which categories and where you would fit. So the first thing to do is to just contact by email. So we have an email address, para.classifications@archerygb.org. And it's myself that monitors that email address, and I will be able to converse with the archer about whether or not their condition is eligible. We do have to assess based on the IPC, or International Paralympic Committee, definitions of disability, and there are some conditions which will not be eligible. But we would converse by email to begin with to determine whether or not the archer has an eligible condition and whether or not a classification is needed. From there, we can then determine whether a classification can be provided without a face-to-face assessment. So in some situations, like for an amputee, for example, things are quite straightforward. It's quite easy to assess without necessarily needing to actually have a face-to-face assessment. In most scenarios, a face-to-face assessment will be needed. So we would then need to arrange when would be a convenient and appropriate time to do that. There are usually about 2 or 3 opportunities throughout the year to do that. In the meantime, if an archer is not classified, then they can still shoot. They can self-declare their disability, and they can shoot in mainstream tournaments against their mainstream archers. And we would strongly recommend that, because really the only purpose of a classification is for inclusion on the para squad. and looking towards international tournaments. But for national tournaments, there aren't really enough classified like para archers to have a competitive sort of circuit around the mainstream archery tournaments. So most of the time people will be shooting in the mainstream categories anyway. You can self-declare your need for any adaptive devices. You don't need to have an certification to be allowed to use a stool or a wheelchair or a bow bandage or anything else. So if you're enjoying your archery and you're getting on well with it, then just keep enjoying it and keep improving. And if you get to a point where classification is needed, then we'll absolutely arrange that for you. If the archer has a classifiable condition that we feel is appropriate, they're likely to meet the minimum eligibility criteria, then I would do a physical examination with that person. So most people will have gone through a physiotherapy assessment at least a couple of times before, but it's essentially the same sort of thing. So I will have a look at their documentation on their disability first. I can only assess documented conditions. I can't assess functionally for conditions that we don't have a clear diagnosis for. But that will then determine which limbs I'm looking at. So if somebody's got a documented condition affecting, say, their left arm, I will assess their left arm and I will assume that the rest of their body is sort of functionally normal for the purposes of the archery assessment. But depending on what the condition is and what their documentation says, we will go through a step-by-step like physical assessment, which will involve sort of pushing and pulling, and I will be feeling the strength. So there'll be lots of kind of hold that still, don't let me move you, or push me away, pull me in, and I'm just trying to assess for the strength of the muscles. The muscle scales that we use is called the Oxford scale. So it's a 5-point system. So 5 points for a normal healthy muscle, 4 points for a muscle that is able to move against gravity and resistance, but not to full strength. 3 points for a muscle that can move against gravity, but not against resistance. 2 points for sort of some movement with gravity eliminated. 1 point for a flicker, but no real movement. And 0 points for no movement at all. So in order to be a classifier, you do need to be qualified as either a physiotherapist or as a doctor. We're always looking for more classifiers. So if you or someone that you know has the appropriate qualifications and would be interested, then please do email in to our para.classifications@archerygb.org email address, and we'd love to hear from you.